So I already covered the first 6 episodes of Transformers Prime and decided why not keep going. Break down the series episode by episode whenever I want, and then who knows, maybe do the same for Robots in Disguise, to truly find out once and for all how well it all stands up when watched back to back. So let's talk about episode 7, Scrapheap. The episode begins with Blockhead and Bumblebee walking through the Arctic as they follow a signal leading them to a giant frozen Cybertronian pod. This introduces us to a machine we've never seen yet, capable of tracking either a unique signature emitted from Cybertronian's relics or the energon that may be contained within it. Taking it back to base, we learn that
prolonged exposure to sub-zero conditions can cause permanent system damage,
which adds more knowledge of the bots. Last video it was about military ranks and life cycles. This video it hints at the biological aspect of these living machines. They also say that the
pod can't be opened while it's frozen solid.
Thank you, Ratchet, you've been a lot of help. The scene ends with the pod defrosting and something breaking us into the beginning theme. This does a good job keeping the mystery, not answering the question of whether what is getting loose is friend or foe, and hoping to hook us into finding out. We then see Optimus and RC gearing to investigate the Arctic. They have sensors that will sound once they start getting too cold, warning them of imminent system failure, immediately setting up stakes and foreshadowing the moment when those sensors go off. The kids then arrive as we learn that it's a Saturday, so they will be there all day since they are off from school, something that Ratchet isn't too pleased with, which is a sentiment that has been mirrored in previous episodes. Miko tells him hey in an energetic way, one that he isn't too fond of, whereas Jack just waves and he waves back. A silent moment of respect between them. RC tells Jack she's on exploration duty, and Jack tries to guilt her into taking him with her, up until he finds out that it's to the Arctic. Raph has a different response to that news though.
I've always wanted to see snow.
As someone who sees it every winter, this scene is a reminder of how blessed I am, and how things that I take for granted I should be more grateful for. Optimus says that the temperatures are too harsh for both bots and humans,
but I will bring you back a snowball.
After the space bridge ominously goes down, possibly foreshadowing sabotage by whatever came out of the pod, in order to get Raph's mind off things, Bumblebee brings up gaming, a match of last one standing, but gets caught away with Blockhead by Ratchet, and then when Raph goes to get the controllers, Miko snatches them up, taking one and giving the other to Jack. Third thing in a row that hasn't went Raph's way, and although he's taken it like a champ, you can see the light in his face fading away. Jack noticing this, he shows the compassion and leadership potential he showcased in my first video, offering the controller to Raph in an attempt to cheer him up. Once Raph declines, he goes back to playing and gives Raph the space that he may need. Meanwhile, Ratchet is explaining to Bach and B that the ground bridge is down. Optimus and RC made it to the Arctic safely, but they may not make it back if they don't get it fixed. Raph walks around the base, pretending to be in cold, harsh temperatures, showing two things. One, no matter how smart he is, he's still a kid playing pretend. Two, it really exemplifies how much he wanted to go to the Arctic, see snow, and have that experience. The base reason for him feeling so down. He stumbles onto a loose screw, picking it up and putting it into his pocket, in time to get tripped by a bobblehead looking bot. He takes out the screw to use it to play fetch, as the bot grinds it into nothing and the two walk down a hallway back to the bots, where the camera zooms out, revealing more damage done to the base, possibly by the bot that we just saw. Raph then takes his newfound friend to meet his other ones, leading to this response.
Scraplet! Scraplet!
This demonstrates the pure destructive potential that the Scraplet may have due to how the bots responded to it. Blockhead is the biggest and genuinely looked at as the toughest of the bots, but one Scraplet sent him into a panic. Ratchet is the most logical, but his response was nothing but emotional, and Bumblebee demonstrated last episode that he is the most eager in order to gain the experience needed for a promotion, which his response in stepping away and yet using his arm to shield the others fits very well with. We learn that
the most dangerous vermin ever to crawl upon the face of Cybertron.
This
and that we
have no idea the damage that teeny thing could do!
Again, since it's coming out of those bots, characterized how they are, it's intended for us to take them entirely seriously. We then get to see the Scraplet wake back up, use vision that senses metal, and make a break for the bots. The trio misses them with every shot, due to the Scraplet's size and speed mixed with the panic from the bots. It chews its way up Bumblebee's body, breaks free from its grip, and is only stopped by Raph with a crowbar. This takes into account that size doesn't necessarily equate to power, due to how the bot's big size and metallic frames usually lead to them being rather durable powerhouses, and yet in this case it makes them slow, uncoordinated targets waiting to be hunted, demolished, and snuffed out. The skin of humans is far more fragile than their metal allies, and yet here that very flesh is their greatest strength since they are perceived as a source of food. They are also quicker against foes their size, able to target the small Scraplets easier, and since they aren't perceived as a valued target, they can take as many out as they want without ever being retaliated against. Jack disarms Raph since the threat's been neutralized, as Miko says she never saw that coming, again referencing them judging the Scraplet by its appearance and underestimating their enemy. Like the humans, the Scraplets are smaller and faster than the bots. They only seem to be attracted to metal, and they can devour it in great speeds, as seen with the screw earlier and the new paint job that was just given to Bumblebee. Raph runs over and apologizes, panicking over the pain that was just caused, hoping that Bumblebee is going to be okay. Ratchet immediately takes a look at him, saying that it's only a mesh wound and that he'll live. Now that Bumblebee is confirmed to be okay and the dangers presented by the Scraplets are known, Balkhead decides to chime in, questioning if they believe him now, stating that Scraplets will eat anything metal but have a certain affinity for living metal. The reason for this isn't made clear. It can be speculated that it's due to the energon that's the lifeblood of the Transformers, or maybe just due to the fact that living metal moves and attracts their attention more, like whenever the screw was thrown earlier. It can also have to do with the sort of thermal the Scraplet used earlier, and it having an ability to detect heat within the bots. Due to how the Scraplet reacted to Raph, rubbing on him like a pet, playing fetch, understanding the comfort and safety that he provides, it's hard to consider them monsters whose sole goal is to eat metal and eat metal alone. Whether they have some semblance of a soul like the Transformers do is not something I believe is touched on any other time in this series, but I guess we'll see as we break it down. Furthering the idea that they are pests and this is an infestation, Ratchet says that when it comes to Scraplets there is never just one, as he leads us to where he believes the source of the infestation began, the pod recovered from earlier. It's mostly thought out now, and Ratchet says it's called a Scraplet trap, possibly fired into space eons ago and landing in the Arctic where the cold temperature kept them in a form of stasis. Due to their size, it's safe to assume they froze far quicker than the bots will who are stranded there now, but the situation is similar for both, shutting them down and going into a form of stasis. The pod probably protected the Scraplets from freezing themselves, with the pod freezing instead and keeping them alive. The bots don't have a pod of their own, and with the trap empty and the Scraplets loose, the situation is more dire than ever. Ratchet points out that all the damage we have seen, the ground bridge being down, infrastructure damage, are all signs that the infestation is well underway. So the ground bridge can't be repaired until the Scraplets are taken care of, unable to do more damage, and needing to be done while the damage they do can still be repaired, and the exploration team still have the mobility to explore. Speaking of, Optimus and RC are scaling a cliffside, when the sensors they acquired earlier start to go off. Optimus radios back to base, heeding the warning of Ratchet from earlier, but unable to get a response back. Ratchet tries to update them on the situation, but the Scraplets already damaged a communication system, leaving both sides to fend on their own. This is an interesting way to go about things, seeing firsthand how the bots will respond without Optimus's lead, and whether Ratchet can step up in his place as he demonstrated when barking orders at the beginning. It also brings into question whether the others will follow his lead, since they begrudgingly did earlier, or if the panic of the situation will cause division amongst the ranks. Before this point, they were in situations together that they had control over. Here though, they they are separated numbers, fighting foes that have an advantage in numbers, speed, and ferocity, with the amount being speculation and the possibilities being disastrous. Optimus and RC, shown to be two very strong characters that have been through a lot, are now in an environment they are unfamiliar with, in a situation where strength, speed, and bravery cannot get them out. It sets up the possibility of seeing vulnerabilities that we wouldn't normally consider, not Decepticon warriors or murderous scraplets, but instead the very weather that existed on this Earth far before they arrived, and can't be beaten, only survived. Two different situations, two different dangers, setting up potential stakes by setting a precedent of dangers being from more than just the Decepticons. Now back to the show, Ratchet is talking about how if they don't eradicate the vermin as quickly as possible, the entire base will be reduced to nothing but scrap. So Bumblebee and Blockhead tell him they should retreat and leave it to the Scraplets, causing Ratchet to take his place in a leadership position. He says that retreat is not an option, that they need to get the ground bridge up and running soon, or else RC and Optimus will cease to function. This shows the loyalty Ratchet previously demonstrated in my prior videos, how even if it may mean the very sacrifice of his life, he will stand by his fellow Autobots, especially Optimus, regardless. Miko stomps over to get into Bach's head, telling him that he never runs, showing that she still cares about the tough exterior she's grown to love, and expects that kind of resolve from him because of it. Blockhead defends his lack of enthusiasm for staying in here with these monsters, saying that she's never seen them fully devour a bot, but it's sadly something that he has. They pick apart bots from the inside out, fuse by fuse, circuit by circuit, until there's nothing left. He's obviously frightened that he will be next. Seeing such brutality firsthand, it's hard to be able to blame him. He's the biggest bot here, the biggest target with the most metal and the least speed. He's especially vulnerable, and that vulnerability is frightening for him. The kids step up to the plate and say that they want to help, that due to the reasons I surmised earlier, they are best suited for the job. Even Ratchet admits that although he usually finds the flesh to be one of the human's worst qualities, it's a big advantage, but only under these extremes. Basically saying that their help would be appreciated without actually having to say those words and drop his pride to do it. Jack proposes what is practically the buddy system, one human per bot, with the groups being obvious. The two normal sets of partners both go to separate locations hunting for the Scraplets, as he stays behind with Ratchet to guard him as he works on the ground bridge. A fairly decent idea, separating the forces and dividing the enemy's attention because of it, with the biggest flaw I can think of being that the humans are too small to cover the massive size of the bots without letting Scraplets get through, but we'll see how they address it. Optimus and RC are perilously walking through the barren Arctic climate, freezing to death with no way to get back. This honestly has to be a very frightening experience. No matter how much they trust their team, as far as they know, something could have went horribly wrong, leaving them abandoned. As they walk, RC falls to the ground with Optimus helping her up. In order to save face and come up with a suggestion to try and help them survive, RC says,
"Are you sure a nice long drive wouldn't help? I hear Miami's beautiful this time of year."
Keeping a cool head in this dire situation, while trying not to seem like she's dragging anyone down, but instead offering suggestions in order to keep the hope alive. Optimus responds matter-of-factly, which goes well with his character, trying to lead RC to safety and ensure they don't put themselves into more danger. He says the nearest temperate climate is still too far, and that they should find a place to take shelter instead and attempt to insulate themselves. Back at base, Blockhead and Miko are hunting bugs, retracing Raph's steps in the process. The hallway that looked big with Raph and the Scraplet looks small when someone like Blockhead is walking through, recreating the claustrophobic fears used in a lot of horror media, with Blockhead jumping at shadows and aiming at walls that he walks by. The lights go off and Blockhead screams for his life, showing just how frightened he is of the Scraplets, further emphasizing the experience he had with them in the past that we learned about earlier. Miko's line,
"Did you just scream like a little girl?"
further pushes the point home that size truly doesn't determine ability, with Blockhead's higher pitched scream contrasting with his bulky appearance and normal deeper voice tone. You know what they say, don't judge a book by its cover. He says they'll talk about his reaction later, and the two head into the next hallway. Miko tells him to stay focused, but right on cue he hears scurrying around, blasting everything, trying to eliminate the threat before cables fall down and send him into a greater panic. Once Miko assures him that they're just cables, scraplets pour out of the hole that they came from, and Bulkhead screaming sends us into the next scene. This tried to subvert our expectations by having him jump at shadows with no scraplet failed outcome, till the last scene when everything finally started to seem calm. By the amount of scraplets that came pouring from the ceiling, we finally have some idea of the extent of the infestation, and given the damage that only one scraplet could do, it leaves Buckhead's fate up in the air and the tension higher than ever. Raph and B head to their respective location, gathering clues to follow, hunting the scraplets based on the mess that they leave behind. This shows the difference between the A-team and, pardon the pun, B-team, since Miko and Bulkhead aimlessly walked around, treating every moment as a threat until they finally got surprised by one, whereas Raph and B identify the threat, follow the path that they are evidenced to take, and find their possible location that way. A vent. Opening it up, they see nothing is there, but they hear rattling from behind them as they get surprised by the very scraplets they thought they were tracking, leaving their fate up in the air as well. Whether this was a conscious effort by the scraplets to ambush the two of them, or if this was just a big coincidence is left up in the air. Again, leaving the intelligence of the scraplets up to your interpretation. Back to Jack and Ratch, they still can't get the ground bridge to receive power, as they receive a surprise from a horde of scraplets. Those suckers can fly, adding another layer to the problem I brought up earlier, since they are now confirmed able to get around the kids with ease by flying at an altitude that they can't get to. They can also easily attack from different angles that way, impossible to counter, overwhelming the bots until there is nothing left. Ratchet gets covered head to toe in a matter of seconds, truly showing the speed and mobility of the scraplets and giving us a greater example of the threat that Bulkhead has been warning us about. Even under these dire circumstances, however, Ratchet is able to tell Jack to get the extinguisher, having a greater area of effect as well as better range. Given the fact that there isn't a foamy substance left afterwards as residue, it's safe to assume this is a carbon dioxide extinguisher. Carbon dioxide is extremely cold, and since it's used against electronic fires, it's fitting that it's used to chill out these scraplets that are all fired up. Given their possible freezing rate, and how being cold can completely immobilize them, it's safe to assume the extinguisher is cold enough to get the job done. After the first wave is cleared off a Ratchet, the rest of the team walk into the room and become immediate targets. They try to put up a fight, but just like Ratchet, are quickly overwhelmed as the kids can't destroy them as fast as they show up, leaving us off with this ominous action, reaching for the stars, begging for help, trying to survive. Back to our coldest comrades, they are backed against a wall, still out in the elements, unable to find more suitable shelter. They are close together but not close enough, not providing each other with heat, which could extend their lives for even a few more seconds that may really count. Optimus wakes RC up, trying to keep her alert and intern alive. RC says they should play a game, guessing who screwed things up back at base. Optimus says their predicament could have been caused by some minor malfunction, and RC, knowing how he would respond, finishes his sentence in a way that keeps the game going. She says Bulkhead was never too graceful. He probably tripped over some power cords, just like whenever he walked into power lines when they first arrived on Earth. A possible reference to the Michael Bay movies where Ratchet, if I remember correctly, did the same. Optimus still spins this as a compliment in Bulkhead's favor, in the most prime way possible by acknowledging Bulkhead's size in comparison to things on Earth, but stating that his inner strength is boundless and that he shouldn't be measured by size alone, a reference to not only the main lesson of this episode that we've seen seen throughout, but to RC's size, her small frame carrying such a big weight, something that was explored within my first video. We cut back to the base where we see the battle was won, but given the condition of the bots, it had to have been a close fight, which was the outcome foreshadowed by the arm raise earlier. As a guy that likes action, I'm normally disappointed when action scenes, especially big ones, are skipped from one scene to the next. Here, however, I'm glad they didn't put it on screen. The thread has been laid out well, we now know what the Scraplets are capable of, and seeing the bots and kids swat at them like flies wouldn't be too entertaining, nor would it add anything to the plot itself. Ratchet says that those were just scouts, implying that the others know where they are and are probably headed their way, further exemplifying his loyalty and ability to think of the big picture even under extreme pressure. He reminds his allies of the responsibility they bear, with Optimus and RC's life being solely in their hands, rallying them together by saying,
Optimus and RC will never make it home. We must get the ground bridge operational.
The word must makes it an absolute, not leaving it up to question or interpretation, but stating it as a fact, rallying the others behind him, behind his goal to save RC and Prime, causing the kids to come up with the idea of sending the Scraplets back to the Arctic at the same time as they bring the other two back, giving more drive to fix and then open the bridge, since they now have a plan to keep them all safe. Ratchet figures out where the breach is by thinking hard about it, kinda goofy given how quickly it took him to determine it, and the lack of process of elimination that was applied. He is smart though, and we aren't aware of what all he tried while the teams were hunting, so my headcanon will say that he narrowed it down then and we'll move on from that. He sends the kids to fix a leaking energon fuel line, since the bots are leaking energon themselves, but unwisely doesn't leave one there to protect them. They are basically sitting ducks this way, but whatever you say, Ratchet. The kids sneak through the Scraplets, walking along the path to the fuel line, being completely disregarded since they aren't made of metal, yet again bringing into question why all three needed to go in the first place. They find the leak and Jack sets down the toolkit to flex his slight mechanical know-how that was slightly represented by him working on the bike in the episode as he talks with Miko, as well as him building his own motorcycle from scratch in the last episode. As he fixes it, it seems like the other two are just going to watch, again making me wonder why it's a three-man job. Ratchet and Bulkhead talk about the plan, with Ratchet saying that the Code Conquerors can't come back into base with the Scraplets still in it, so Bait will have to lead the Scraplets out through the portal before Optimus and RC come through it. Given that they have an affinity for living metal, it's safe to assume that one of the bots will be Bait, and given Bulkhead's very established fear, it will be the perfect time for him to overcome it. But I guess we'll see how it plays out. The kids are all three working on the pipe. RC and Optimus are laying in the snow, with their body temperatures getting lower as they start to freeze to death. They get a really sweet scene here, where Optimus says that if this really is the end, the moment their lights go out and they become one with the Allspark, leading to RC yet again interrupting him by saying that it's been an honor serving with him. Primes don't really share feelings too often, and RC recognizes that, stopping him from having to do so. She's letting him die as he's lived, how she's known him, letting their actions speak louder than words as they hold each other's hands preparing for the afterlife, which we get hints of said afterlife, with the line becoming one with the Allspark, showing that there is some semblance of a deeper meaning in death in the Transformers Prime universe. The Scraplets attack the base, bringing their full force this time, as Ratchet uses his last ounce of strength to stand up and open the ground bridge. With him and Bumblebee both down, Bulkhead, as was foreshadowed throughout the episode, faces his fears, becoming the Bait and hurting the Scraplets through the portal. He warns Optimus and RC to get down, which they try to do, but thankfully the Scraplets freeze before they can make contact, bouncing off the bots like rocks off a roof made of tin. The episode concludes with the bots getting checkups from Ratchet with help from the kids. Optimus thanks Ratchet for the lives he saved today, recognizing him as taking the leadership position, and that being the thing that saved their lives. Ratchet, however, shares the credit with the kids, saying he's thankful that the outbreak occurred on a Saturday. His way of apologizing for his disappointment in the beginning, as well as showing respect where he has struggled to before. Optimus yet again references the main lesson of this episode, saying that the kids may be small, but they are strong. Pretty on the nose, all things considered, but it doesn't harm pacing given it's the end of the episode and the nature of the scene, so no complaints here. The episode ends with Miko screaming like a little girl about a spider, causing Balkhead to call her out just like she did to him, a joke as well as a callback to him saying they'll talk about it later. Now they don't have to. Balk overcame his fears this episode, showed that his size and muscle doesn't equate to invulnerability, but that he still has the resolve to push through his feelings and get the job done, something that will be touched on in the future when a new bot joins the fray and a battle for an artifact has a deadly outcome. We'll talk about it more if we get there though. Overall, this was a solid episode. Not great by any means, but still pretty good. It does leave some logical inconsistencies in terms of the universe, however, with the bots fighting in the cold darkness of space in my first video and not freezing or seeming to suffer from any sort of code-related damages whatsoever. Here, however, they are in the arguably coldest place on Earth, but it wouldn't compare to the harsh cold that they would have experienced in space. Yes, it's a nitpick for sure, but as was pointed out by a Transformers fan who's a good friend of mine, it's worth talking about nonetheless. It teased a possible ship of RC and Optimus within the fanbase, something for fans to play with, latch onto, and canonize in their heads. The way they handled it, however, was not in a romantic way, smartly caused by not allowing Optimus to finish his sentence, leaving it up in the air for however the fans interpret it, which this series is surprisingly good at, with more respected and serious subjects as well that we'll cover in the future. We got a glimpse of threats from Cybertron that aren't Decepticons, beings with intelligence that have a destructive nature. It sets up potential for us to see even more Cybertronian species, weapons, artifacts, diseases, and more that we normally wouldn't consider when thinking of the Transformers themselves. We also got to see how the team functions without a leader, in dire situations when tensions are high. We got to understand the respect that the others have for Ratchet's intelligence, and that even though it may be begrudgingly, they are willing to listen to him and trust he'll get them through, further portraying the idea that him and Optimus are old friends, gruff veterans compared to the rest, and that the others can rely on their experience whenever it matters most. The kids got to have a helping role again, with Jack able to use his mechanical side that's been teased, as well as show his maturity by how he responds to Ratchet at the beginning, in a calm and collected way that mirrors who he is engaging with, as well as how he jumped in to stop Raph when the fight was over, took initiative in coming up with the idea of sending the Scraplets back to the Arctic, listened to Ratchet and got the extinguisher without question, was willing to give up his spot against Miko in order to cheer up Raph, and far more, showing his leadership potential that he showcased in my first video. Raph trying to cheer himself up by playing pretend reminds us that he's the youngest of the group, still a kid, but it's a departure from how he handled the situation in my first video once he broke down due to Jack and Miko's arguing, him being accepting of the things that went wrong without shutting down and instead either finding new fun or helping solve the problems can be seen as some character growth from him. We aren't aware of how much time has passed since last episode, but him being accustomed to spending time and working with the bots has had and continues to have an effect on him. The episode also shows the mortality of the bots, with two different dangers, environmental and physical, neither of which were related to the main greater threat of the Decepticons, giving us some more precedence for the risk the bots will take, as well as why they have a need for more members. They are not only outnumbered by cons, but undermanned for expeditions as well as for problem solving back at base. We already talked about the whole Ratchet development, so I'm not going to get back into it. That's honestly all I have to say though, with no big strides taken and everything going back to normal by the end. Truthfully, this is an episode that could be skipped. It doesn't really enhance the plot, the characters' developments aren't substantial enough to make a huge impact on them for the remainder of the series. What are your thoughts on this episode? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this and want to see more, then subscribe, dislike if you disliked it, and for more news, reviews, and whatever we choose, stay tuned to Nerdsfeed. Have a great day. Thank you.